Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a microscopic true crime story. We're going to uncover a hidden villain, one that's literally lurking in plain sight inside our very own cells. It's a fascinating and, honestly, slightly terrifying journey. But by the end of this, I promise you're going to see human health in a completely different light.
Okay, let's start with a bit of a mystery. What could possibly link joint pain, devastating memory loss, and severe diabetic complications? I mean, on the surface, if you flip through a medical textbook, these look like completely separate disorders that are managed by completely different specialists.
Now, these might look like entirely different biological crime scenes. We've got neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. We've got the painful wear and tear of osteoarthritis. We've got the vascular damage seen in diabetes like nephropathy and retinopathy. Oh, and stroke. But here's the crazy part. They actually share a single devastating culprit. It's a mechanism that causes the body to quite literally rust from the inside out.
Here's our investigation roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the universal cellular threat, the Fenton Chemistry engine, rusting the brain, vascular and joint damage, and finally scavenging the free radicals.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the universal cellular threat, reactive oxygen species.
So the foundation of this whole mystery really comes down to a concept called oxidative stress. You've probably heard of antioxidants, right? Well, oxidative stress happens when our mitochondria, which are basically our cellular energy factories, produce way too many highly reactive byproducts. These are called reactive oxygen species, or ROS. Now, under normal conditions, a tiny bit of ROS is actually perfectly fine. The cell uses it for signaling. But when there's an imbalance, that's when these reactive molecules go completely rogue. They start interacting with and damaging our DNA, our proteins, and our cellular lipids.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Fenton Chemistry engine, the spark that causes the rust.
So what's the actual spark? It all comes down to a process called Fenton Chemistry. Here's how it breaks down. First, during normal energy production, the mitochondria's electron transport chain accidentally leaks electrons, which produces a molecule called superoxide. Second, the cell's natural defenses convert that superoxide into hydrogen peroxide. Yep, literally the exact same stuff you have sitting in your bathroom cabinet. And then comes the fatal third step. When trace metals that are naturally present in our bodies, specifically iron and copper, encounter that hydrogen peroxide, a catastrophic chemical reaction occurs. The metals catalyze the peroxide, ripping it apart and unleashing these highly destructive molecules called hydroxyl radicals.
And that brings us to the ultimate villains of our story, hydroxyl radicals. These things have an unpaired electron, and they are absolutely desperate to find a match. They will violently rip electrons off of anything nearby. DNA, cell membranes, vital proteins, you name it. Just like iron oxidizing on an old car that's been left out in the rain, these hydroxyl radicals essentially rust our cellular machinery, and that leads directly to cell death.
Let's look at where this hits hardest. Section 3, rusting the brain, neurodegeneration.
It's actually super fascinating to look at the divide between two completely devastating diseases. In Parkinson's, the normal metabolism of dopamine itself creates an oxidative burden, but it's compounded by defects in the mitochondria's complex 1. That sets the perfect stage for massive ROS production. On the other hand, with Alzheimer's disease, the focus shifts slightly to the metals themselves. Free copper ions act as the catalyst here, binding directly with those infamous amyloid beta peptides. The copper just sits right there on the protein, constantly driving that Fenton chemistry and causing direct oxidative modifications that make the plaques even more toxic to the brain.
But here's what's truly alarming. This engine isn't just fueled by internal aging, it can absolutely be triggered from the outside. Environmental toxins like paraquat, which is a common herbicide, or the synthetic neurotoxin MPTP, act by directly attacking and inhibiting the mitochondria's complex 1. Think of it like someone blocking the exhaust pipe of a car. It forces a massive overproduction of superoxide, which feeds right back into our Fenton chemistry engine, unleashes a flood of hydroxyl radicals, and directly drives the accumulation of the toxic alpha-synuclein proteins that define Parkinson's.
Now let's zoom out to the rest of the body. Section 4, vascular and joint damage, the systemic spread.
Let's take diabetes, for example. The root of diabetic complications isn't just the sugar itself floating around, it's what that sugar is actually doing to the mitochondria. Hyperglycemia, which is high blood sugar, causes profound mitochondrial dysfunction. That dysfunction generates a massive amount of ROS. And that ROS, driven relentlessly by our Fenton engine, causes structural damage right there in the cells lining your blood vessels.
This leads directly to those classic, devastating diabetic complications: retinopathy in the eyes, neuropathy in the nerves, and severe nephropathy, which is the destruction of the kidneys.
But wait, high glucose does something else that's pretty sinister. Excess glucose reacts directly with proteins to form advanced glycation end products, or AGEs for short. And these AGEs, they aren't just inert cellular trash. They actively bind to specific receptors on the cell membrane called RAGE. Activating RAGE triggers massive cellular inflammation and, you guessed it, a further explosion of oxidative stress. It becomes this vicious, completely self-feeding cycle of cellular rust.
Now, if we look closely at the blood vessels, we can see how this all builds into an acute crisis, like a stroke. In our blood vessels, we completely rely on a little molecule called nitric oxide to keep our arteries relaxed and open. But oxidative stress specifically targets and knocks out nitric oxide. That literally robs our arteries of their ability to regulate themselves. And even worse, the nitric oxide reacts with the superoxide to form peroxynitrite. That's a highly toxic molecule that severely damages proteins, skyrockets vascular inflammation, and directly paves the way for a stroke.
You know, you might actually be surprised to see osteoarthritis on this list, since we usually just think of it as mechanical wear and tear. But nope, even here the exact same Fenton reaction is at play. The electron transport chain in our joint cells, our chondrocytes, leaks electrons. This forms hydrogen peroxide, which then reacts with trace iron and copper swimming around in the joint fluid. The resulting hydroxyl radicals mercilessly degrade our cartilage matrix right from the inside out. So your joints aren't just wearing down, they are quite literally rusting.
Okay, so the situation sounds a bit dire, right? But scientists are fighting back. Section 5. Scavenging the free radicals, the counterattack.
Researchers are looking way past simple things like vitamin C and are currently developing some incredibly advanced nanomedicine. Specifically, they're engineering mesoporous polydopamine nanoparticles, or MPDA for short. Think of these little guys as incredibly tiny, highly porous microscopic sponges that can safely roam the body, actively seeking out and neutralizing those dangerous reactive oxygen species.
What makes these MPDA nanoparticles so revolutionary is that they're designed to actually possess enzyme-like activity. They mimic our body's natural defense enzymes, like SOD and catalase. This means they can step in at the very beginning of the Fenton Chemistry engine. They scavenge the superoxide and safely decompose the hydrogen peroxide into basic water and oxygen. Basically, they cut off the fuel supply. By eliminating the hydrogen peroxide before it can ever interact with the iron and copper, they completely prevent the formation of those deadly hydroxyl radicals.
And the research data backs this up in a really incredible way. When cells are put under severe oxidative stress, standard treatments offer, well, a little bit of help. But the specially engineered MPDA nanoparticles, they show a dramatically more pronounced ability to decompose these threats. They aren't just antioxidants, they're highly efficient machines designed specifically to shut down Fenton chemistry at its source.
Which leaves us with a pretty mind-blowing final thought. We've seen how Fenton chemistry and oxidative stress aggressively drive everything from Parkinson's to diabetes to failing joints. So if these new nanomedicines allow us to truly master this chemistry, if we can finally stop ourselves from rusting from the inside out, have we just found the blueprint to defeating chronic disease and perhaps even aging itself? Think about that the next time you see a piece of rusting metal. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep your curiosity alive.